Yeah, you heard that right. I was gone for just 1 week. Came back to find strangers on my land, bidding on my property like it was theirs. One woman in a navy vest stood there, clipboard in hand, smile cold as steel. And when I tried to walk closer, she called 911, claiming I was trespassing on my own ranch. But the truth, welcome back to HOA Stories. My name's Jack Reynolds. I live just outside Austin, Texas. I'm a ranch owner, a coffee drinker, and lately, a full-time survivor of HOA madness. If you hate HOAs as much as I do, if you believe no one should control what you do on your own land, then hit that subscribe button right now, and type BOHOA in the comments to show you're one of us. Share this story with that one friend who's also had a run-in with these power-hungry folks. Because this one's for all of us who've been bullied by the board. The title says it all. But not even that can explain the insanity of what really happened. It started the day I came home early. After 2 weeks on the road, I just wanted a quiet morning. Some coffee, some air, and maybe the sound of the wind against my porch. Instead, I got police sirens. And a woman I barely knew screaming that I was trespassing on my own property. Before we dive into this madness, welcome to HOA Stories, where peace and privacy don't exist, and every fence post comes with a rulebook. I'm Jack, 48, divorced, retired from construction, living on what I thought was my dream ranch, 2 acres of quiet outside the suburbs. Bought it 5 years ago after my marriage fell apart. I wanted space, freedom, no neighbors watching. But then came them, the HOA, and one woman in particular, Nancy Fletcher, HOA president, or as everyone secretly called her, Karen of the county. You could hear her voice before you saw her, that sharp nasal tone that made every sentence sound like a legal threat. Your fence is 2 inches too high. Your barn door isn't regulation red. You can't have chickens unless they've been approved. Yeah. She actually said that once. I ignored her most of the time. But ignoring Nancy was like ignoring a smoke alarm. Eventually, she finds a way to get your attention. So there I was, pulling up the long gravel driveway at 9 a.m. The sky was bright. My truck still had dust from the highway. I'd been gone 2 weeks visiting my sister in Montana. Didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. But when I reached the gate, I saw something that made my chest tighten. A crowd. Cars lined up along the road. People milling around on my property. A big white tent set up on the grass. And a sign that said, Fairway Meadows HOA, foreclosure auction. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were doing it next door. But then I saw the big number painted on the side of my barn, #42. That was my house number. They were auctioning my ranch. I killed the engine and stepped out. A few people turned their heads, curious. Then I saw her, Nancy, standing behind a folding table with a clipboard, sunglasses, and that smug little smirk. She was laughing with a couple in matching polos, probably the type who thought buying foreclosed property made them business geniuses. When she saw me, her smile froze. Her face twitched. I walked straight toward her. "Morning, Nancy," I said. "What the hell is this?" She blinked, then whispered something to the man beside her. He immediately pulled out his phone. "Sir," she said in that fake polite tone, "you're trespassing." I laughed. "Trespassing? This is my land." She tilted her head. "Not anymore." I felt my hands tighten. The people nearby started whispering. I looked around, tables with paperwork, a portable speaker, even a food truck down by the gate. They were really doing it. "Nancy," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've been gone for 2 weeks. What in God's name do you mean not anymore?" She took out a sheet of paper. "You were delinquent on your dues. The HOA board voted to repossess under Section 11C. "Delinquent?" I said. "I pay online every damn quarter." "Oh, not dues," she said sweetly. "Maintenance fines. Lawn height, unauthorized livestock, improper fencing color. You racked up quite the list while you were away." I stared at her. "You can't repossess someone's property over grass." She smiled wider. "We can if it affects community value." And that's when I realized she was serious. She really thought she owned the place. I walked toward my porch. She followed, snapping her fingers like she was calling a dog. "Sir, you are not allowed to enter the premises until the bidding concludes." I ignored her. My key still fit the door. When I pushed it open, the air smelled off, like lemon cleaner and someone else's perfume. The furniture had been moved. Boxes stacked by the wall. It looked like a stage house. Nancy's voice came from behind me, sharp and panicked. "I'm calling 911. "Go ahead," I said. "Maybe they'll remind you whose name's on the deed." She did call. And within 5 minutes, a sheriff's car pulled up. 2 deputies stepped out. Nancy ran up to them, hands waving like she was guiding traffic. "That man broke in," she yelled. "He's unstable. He threatened me." I stood on the porch, arms crossed. The older deputy looked at me and sighed. You could tell he'd seen this kind of thing before. "Sir, can I see some ID?" I handed it to him. He checked, frowned, then looked at Nancy. "Says here he's the owner." Nancy scoffed. "That can't be right. The HOA seized this property." The deputy looked tired already. "Ma'am, unless there's a court order, HOA doesn't trump property title." Her face went pale. "I'll get one," she snapped. "Do that," he said, and turned to me. "You're good, sir. Sorry for the confusion." The crowd had gone quiet. The potential buyers were whispering, looking uncomfortable. Nancy was shaking, not from fear, but from rage. As the deputies left, she hissed under her breath. "You think this is over, Jack? You embarrassed me in front of the board." I said nothing, just closed the door. Inside, the silence hit me like a wall. I walked through every room. Half my stuff was gone, boxed, labeled, or missing. They'd started clearing out my life before I even knew it. That night, I sat in my living room with a cold beer, staring at the walls. There was a part of me that wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. Nancy had been trying to push me out for months. First it was letters. Then fines. Then surprise inspections. I thought it was just personal. Maybe she hated that I didn't mow the lawn every week. But now, I realized it wasn't about grass or fences. It was about power. People like Nancy don't run HOAs to help the neighborhood. They run them to own it, piece by piece. I checked my bank account that night. No missed payments. No fines posted. Then I checked my email. Nothing from the HOA. Nothing from anyone. But one message caught my eye. Sent while I was on my trip. Subject: Notice of auction. Property 42 Fairway Meadows. From fairwaylegal@meadowasic.org. The email said my ranch was to be auctioned due to unresolved violation penalties. And get this, it was approved unanimously by the board. The board I hadn't even known existed. I scrolled to the bottom and froze. The unpaid fines, listed included: unauthorized livestock, goats, I have no goats. Non-standard mailbox, mine's from Home Depot. Fence painted wrong shade of brown, it's natural wood. Failure to maintain lawn height under 2.5 inches. Total, $9,872. They actually charged me $10,000 over grass. And the kicker, they'd authorized immediate foreclosure if payment not received within 72 hours. But I'd been on the road when they sent it. They knew I wouldn't see it. They planned this. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark. Crickets outside. The hum of the fridge. The soft tick of the old clock. Nancy thought she'd won. But something in me, something quiet and dangerous, started to wake up. They wanted war. They were about to get it. I picked up my phone, called my old friend Cole, the one who used to work as a real estate lawyer. Told him everything. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Jack, you might be dealing with something bigger than just a neighborhood HOA." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He said, "You ever heard of Fairway Holdings LLC?" I hadn't. "Check who actually owns your HOA," he said. "You'll find it's not Nancy. It's someone she answers to." Then he hung up. I sat there for a while, the glow of the screen lighting up my face. Typed the name he gave me into a search bar. And what I found made my stomach turn. Fairway Holdings wasn't local. It was part of a property investment firm that specialized in buying foreclosed HOA homes, flipping them, and reselling them at profit. It wasn't incompetence. It was a business model. And Nancy was just their pawn. I looked around my half-empty living room and whispered to myself. They tried to sell my life, while I was gone. I took another sip of beer and smiled, the kind of smile that comes before a storm. Let's see how they handle someone who doesn't play by HOA rules. I remember the sound of her voice when she called 911. cold, like she'd done this before. She said the words slowly. "There's a man trespassing on HOA property. He's aggressive. I feel unsafe." Then she looked right at me. Her eyes didn't blink once. I felt my stomach twist. There I was, standing on my own dirt, on the land I'd worked for 15 years. And somehow, I was now the criminal in the story. I tried to talk to her, tried to reason with the people around, but they all stepped back like I was contagious. One of the men muttered something under his breath. I caught the word, trespasser. And suddenly it hit me. Nancy had planned this. The auction sign, the paperwork, the timing of it all. She knew I'd be gone that week. I had mentioned it at the last HOA meeting. Told them I'd be in Colorado visiting family. She must have waited for that exact window to pull this stunt. And the second I came back early, she panicked. That's why she called the cops. To flip the story before I could. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from disbelief. I stood there, half ready to yell, half ready to cry. And then I saw the blue lights. A sheriff's car pulled up, kicking dust across the front yard. 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting near their holsters. Nancy pointed at me before they even said a word. "There he is," she shouted. "He threatened me." I swear one of the officers looked at her like even he didn't buy it. But procedure is procedure. "Sir," the taller deputy said, "step back and keep your hands visible." I raised my arms slowly, still holding my keys, my bag on the ground. "Officer," I said quietly, "this is my ranch, my land. I have proof inside." Nancy laughed, that fake, sharp laugh of hers that always made the hair on my neck stand up. "He thinks it's his land," she said, "but he's months behind on dues. We've already seized it legally." The deputy looked at her, then back at me. You could see the confusion in his eyes. "Sir, do you have any identification or property papers on you?" I didn't. They were all inside, in a safe behind the kitchen door. I told him that. He nodded, said we'd go inside together to get them. But Nancy cut in fast. "Oh, no, she said. "That house is part of the seized property. He has no right to enter." And she blocked the path with her body. That's when I realized. This wasn't just about a fine, or a broken microwave. This was personal. Nancy had been trying to get rid of me for years. She hated my horses. Hated that I didn't keep my grass trimmed like the others. Hated that I parked my truck outside instead of inside the barn. Every board meeting, she'd bring me up. Every complaint, she'd exaggerate. I was her obsession. I took a slow breath, looked at the officer, and said, "Go ahead, check the mailbox. You'll see my name right there. Jack Reynolds." He hesitated, then walked over, opened the rusty little box near the gate, pulled out a few letters. Every one of them said Jack Reynolds. When he turned back, Nancy's smile had vanished. "Ma'am," the deputy said, "his name's on the mail. You sure about this seizure?" She stammered, said something about unpaid dues and emergency board action. But I could see the sweat on her forehead now, the confidence cracking. The other officer walked up quietly, told her they'd need to verify her claim with county records before enforcing anything. That's when she changed tone completely. "Oh, well, maybe it's a misunderstanding," she said. She smiled again, too fast, too forced, and before I could say anything, she turned and told everyone around, "We'll pause the auction for now. Let's be civil, people." Then she gave me that look, the one that said, "You might have won this round, but it's not over." The officers talked to me for a bit, told me they'd check her claims, then left. As the dust from their car settled, the field grew quiet. The buyers packed up their papers. The tent flapped in the wind. Nancy stayed back, pretending to clean up her clipboard. Then she said it, softly, almost whispering. "You really shouldn't have come back early, Jack." That line stuck in my head all night. I locked myself inside the house, sat at the kitchen table, stared at the half-drunk coffee mug I'd left a week ago. Everything smelled the same, looked the same, but it felt different. The air was heavy, like the walls themselves were watching me. I turned on the porch light, and saw her car parked down the street. Still there, engine off. She wasn't leaving. She was waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every creak in the woods sounded like a door opening. By 3 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. Opened my laptop. Started digging through HOA bylaws. That's when I saw it. A section titled, Emergency Asset Reclamation. Apparently, if a homeowner was deemed unreachable or non-compliant for over 14 days, the HOA could initiate a protective auction to reclaim and resell property for unpaid dues. I checked the logs. They had marked me as unreachable for inspection. Just 6 days after I'd left town. 6 days. While I was literally posting pictures online from Colorado. They knew I was gone. They used it against me. I sat there shaking, half angry, half in awe of how dirty this game was. And the craziest part, the fees they claimed I owed were for a mailbox replacement. $200. $200 for a mailbox. And they tried to auction a 2-acre ranch. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or laugh. So I did both. By sunrise, I made coffee and stepped outside. The air smelled like hay and diesel. Peaceful. But I knew it was fake peace. Nancy's car was gone now. But I knew she'd be back. I looked around. The white tent was still half standing. Hay scattered everywhere. And that stupid microwave still sitting on the barrel. I walked up to it. Kicked the barrel so hard the microwave fell and cracked open. Inside it, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A hidden camera. Small, black, blinking. She'd been recording me. Maybe for evidence. Maybe to twist the story even more. I picked it up and laughed bitterly. Because, at that point, the whole thing felt like a twisted reality show. I went inside. Grabbed my phone. Called my lawyer. He didn't even sound surprised. Said he'd had 2 similar HOA cases that month. And both involved the same thing. Fraudulent emergency actions. He told me to keep calm. Not to contact her directly. And to document everything. So I did. Every call. Every letter. Every weird car parked outside. I made a file. Titled it, Operation HOA Karen. That day, I decided one thing. I wasn't just going to fight her. I was going to expose her. But I had no idea. What I was about to find next would drag half the HOA board down with her. So tell me, if you found out your HOA planted a hidden camera on your property, would you call the cops, or handle it your own way? Comment below. I want to know what kind of neighbor you'd be. When I found that camera inside the microwave, I didn't even feel surprised anymore. Just tired. It was like every time I peeled back a layer of this HOA nonsense, there was something uglier underneath. I sat on the porch, holding that broken microwave door in my lap, the little red light on the camera still blinking like it was mocking me. That's when I realized. Nancy didn't just want to find me. She wanted to catch me doing something, anything, that could make her power trip feel justified. I opened the camera. It had a small SD card. I slipped it into my laptop and waited. The screen loaded, and there it was. Hours of footage. All of it of my front yard. Different days. Different angles. Some from before I even left town. And then, one clip made me stop breathing. A video time-stamped 2 days before I left for Colorado. It showed Nancy and 2 other HOA board members walking around my property while I was at work. They were taking pictures, writing notes, pointing at random things like my barn door, the mailbox, even my dog's water bowl. And then, Nancy looked straight into the camera, like she knew it was recording, and said, "Perfect, this will look like neglect." I replayed that line 5 times. Perfect, this will look like neglect. That was her plan all along. To stage a violation. To make it seem like I'd abandoned the place. I leaned back in my chair, ran my hand through my hair, and just laughed, because it was so ridiculously insane. A grown woman plotting fake violations, just to make herself feel like the sheriff of the suburbs. I emailed the footage to my lawyer immediately. He called me back in 10 minutes flat. "Jack, this isn't just HOA nonsense anymore," he said. "This is trespassing. And if they falsified reports, it's fraud." For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I had a shot. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office. It wasn't fancy, just a beige building near the community park. But they acted like it was the White House. When I walked in, the receptionist froze. Like she'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Reynolds," she said nervously, "you're not supposed to." "Save it," I said. "I'm here to see Nancy." Her eyes darted toward a door marked HOA board members only. A few seconds later, Nancy stepped out, clipboard in one hand, coffee cup in the other, still wearing that same navy vest with auction coordinator on it. "Jack," she said, smiling too wide, "we're a little busy today. Maybe you can schedule." I put my laptop on the counter and pressed play. The video started. Her voice echoed across the small office. "Perfect. This will look like neglect." Her face drained of color. She looked at the receptionist, then at me, then back at the screen. When the video ended, I closed the laptop slowly. "Nancy," I said quietly, "you tried to steal my ranch over a $200 mailbox." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You called 911 on me," I continued. "You planted cameras. You lied to officers. And now, you're caught." Her expression shifted. Fear first, then anger, then that same fake smile again. "Jack," she said softly, "I think you misunderstand. This was standard HOA protocol." I laughed out loud. "Standard protocol? You broke into my property and staged evidence." The receptionist looked like she wanted to disappear. Nancy stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You should really think about how far you want to take this," she whispered. "HOA boards have lawyers too, and they're better than yours." I stared at her, then at her name badge. President, Willow Creek HOA. That title had turned her into a dictator. I picked up my laptop, smiled, and said, "Good. Let's see how your lawyers handle a fraud case." Then I walked out. That night, my lawyer and I drafted a report. Attached the video, the hidden camera, and all the HOA letters I'd received. He said we'd file both civil and criminal complaints, but it might take weeks for results. Weeks. I didn't trust Nancy to sit quietly for that long, so I decided to make a little noise of my own. The next day, I printed flyers. Big bold letters. "Is your HOA lying to you?" And under that, a screenshot of Nancy's face from the video, with the words, "Perfect. This will look like neglect." By noon, every mailbox in the community had one. By 3 p.m., my phone started ringing non-stop. Neighbors I barely knew were calling, telling me their stories. How they'd been fined for ridiculous things. A cracked birdbath, a missing fence slat, a faded mailbox color. Everyone had something. It was like I'd opened the floodgates. One old man said Nancy made him repaint his garage 3 times because the beige was too beige. A single mom said she got fined because her kids' bikes were visible from the street. Someone else said she'd been threatened with foreclosure over an unapproved garden trellis. It wasn't just me. Nancy had been terrorizing everyone. And now they were finally talking. That evening, I sat outside watching the sunset. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Until I heard tires crunching on gravel. Nancy's SUV pulled up again. She stepped out, holding one of my flyers in her hand. "Really classy move, Jack," she said, voice sharp. "You think this little stunt will scare me?" I didn't answer. Just sipped my coffee and looked at her. "You're playing with fire," she hissed. "You're spreading lies about an official HOA officer." I smiled. "You mean documented truth?" Her jaw clenched. She took a deep breath and said, "You'll regret this. People around here trust me. You're just a troublemaker." Then she got back into her car and sped off. But what she didn't know was that the entire confrontation was caught on my porch camera. When I watched it later that night, something clicked. This wasn't just ego. This was fear. She was scared. And scared people make mistakes. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my lawyer. Subject line, "Jack, you might want to see this." It was a scanned document from the county recorder's office. Nancy had filed an emergency HOA lien transfer on 3 properties. Mine included. But here's the kicker. One of the signatures on the form belonged to a board member who died last year. Dead for 9 months. I stared at it for a full minute before realizing what that meant. She had forged signatures, used dead names, and filed fake liens. That wasn't HOA abuse anymore. That was straight-up criminal. My lawyer said we now had enough to hand it over to the sheriff's office. I smiled for the first time in days. Because now, It wasn't just me versus Nancy. It was Nancy versus the law. I drove to the sheriff's station that afternoon. Handed over every document, every clip, every letter. The deputy recognized me. The same one from the day Nancy called 911. He looked at the footage and said, "Well, Mr. Reynolds, looks like the HOA president just HOA'd herself right into a felony." We both laughed, because, honestly, that line felt like justice. I drove home as the sun went down. The wind through the open windows. The ranch in sight again. For the first time, I didn't feel small anymore. Didn't feel powerless. I parked the truck, looked out at my land, and said out loud, "Try auctioning it now, Karen." So tell me, if you caught your HOA president forging signatures and faking documents, would you go public right away, or wait to watch her dig her own grave first? Let me know in the comments. The morning after I handed everything to the sheriff, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't even need an alarm. The habit of paranoia had become my clock. For weeks, I'd wake up expecting a fine taped to my door, a letter stuffed in my mailbox, or Nancy's SUV parked outside watching me like a hawk. But this morning, it was quiet. The air felt different. Still, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. I brewed coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and listened. No barking dogs, no kids, no lawnmowers, just the sound of crickets fading into dawn. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. That's usually when trouble starts. Around 9 a.m., a white county vehicle rolled up my driveway. Two men got out, one in a sheriff's jacket, the other in plain clothes. The plainclothes guy flashed a badge. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Detective Cole. We spoke over the phone. Mind if we ask a few questions?" "Sure," I said, motioning toward the porch. "You guys want coffee?" He smiled faintly. "Wouldn't say no." I poured 3 cups, and we sat. The detective opened a folder. "Jack, we've reviewed the materials your lawyer sent. The video, the camera, the documents, it's solid. We confirmed that one of the signatures on that lien transfer belonged to a deceased individual." I leaned forward. "So what happens now?" Cole took a slow sip of his coffee. "Well, we're moving on this. But we need to do it clean. We'll be serving a warrant on the HOA office tomorrow morning. We'll seize records, computers, the whole deal. If your footage holds up, Nancy's in real trouble." I could have hugged the man. But before I could even react, he added, "You might want to lay low until then. Don't poke the bear." "Trust me," I said. "I'm done poking." But I wasn't. Not really. Because part of me wanted to see her face when the law came knocking. That evening, I drove through the neighborhood, just to clear my head. People waved at me for the first time in months. A few even stopped to talk. One neighbor, an older woman named Ruth, said, "Jack, I saw your flyer. About time someone stood up to that witch." She fined me for having wind chimes. Said they were audibly offensive. I laughed. Audibly offensive? That's creative. "She's been running this place like her own kingdom," Ruth said. "Whatever happens, don't back down." I promised I wouldn't. But the strangest thing happened as I drove away. I noticed Nancy's SUV parked 3 blocks over. Lights off. Windows tinted. She wasn't watching her house. She was watching mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time a floorboard creaked, my heart jumped. Around midnight, I went outside with a flashlight, checked the barn, the porch, the mailbox. Nothing. Until I looked at my front door. Someone had taped a note there. I pulled it off carefully. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate, the kind of handwriting that tried too hard to look polite. It read, "You're making a mistake, Jack. Some of us don't forgive." No signature. No HOA letterhead. Just those words. I stood there in the dark for a long time, reading that note over and over. It wasn't just HOA games anymore. It was personal. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6:30 a.m. It was Detective Cole. "We're executing the warrant. If you want to watch from a distance, we're hitting the office in 20. I threw on a jacket and drove to the community center parking lot. From my truck, I could see everything. 4 sheriff's vehicles parked outside the beige HOA building. Uniformed deputies carrying boxes and hard drives out the door. Nancy stood in the parking lot, arms crossed, face pale. She was arguing with Cole. I couldn't hear the words, but her gestures said enough. Then, as one of the officers led her away in cuffs, I finally exhaled. Weeks of humiliation, lies, and manipulation, all ending with the sound of metal clicking shut. It was surreal. But here's the thing about people like Nancy. They never believe they're the villain. Later that afternoon, my lawyer called. She's claiming the video was fabricated, he said. She says you edited it to make her look guilty. She's also accusing you of harassment. I laughed bitterly. So she's doubling down? Harder than ever, he said. But don't worry, we've got timestamps, metadata, everything checks out. She's done. Or so I thought. 2 nights later, I woke up to flashing lights outside. Police cars, again. I rushed to the window, half dreading, half expecting the worst. One officer was walking toward my house. I opened the door before he could knock. Mr. Reynolds, he said. We got a report of a domestic disturbance here. I blinked. What? I live alone. Yeah, he said slowly. Caller said they heard shouting and someone crying. Claimed it was coming from this address. Of course. Nancy's revenge from a jail cell. I invited him in to look around. The place was spotless, silent, calm. The officer nodded. Sorry about the trouble. We'll make a note of it. When he left, I just stood there in the doorway, staring into the night. She might have lost her freedom, but she still had connections. A week passed. Detective Cole called again. Jack, you might want to sit down for this. We pulled data from the HOA servers. Nancy wasn't working alone. I frowned. Who else? 2 other board members. One of them's her brother-in-law. They've been using HOA funds to pay off personal credit cards, car loans, even a boat. I laughed dryly. Of course. The yacht of justice. Cole chuckled. Yeah. But here's the wild part. They also set up a side account to collect auction proceeds. Basically, they'd stage violations, force foreclosures, then sell the properties to a fake holding company they owned. Jesus, I muttered. So it was a scam from the start. Exactly, he said. You were just the one who caught them before they finished the job. By the next week, the whole story hit the local news. Headlines read, HOA president arrested in fraud scheme, residents speak out. Reporters came knocking, cameras flashing, microphones shoved in my face. I didn't want fame. I just wanted peace. But as I stood there answering questions on my porch, I realized something. For the first time, the power wasn't hers anymore. The neighbors watched from their lawns, some smiling, some clapping. A few even brought pies, saying, "You did what we were all too scared to do." It was nice. Strange, but nice. That night, I sat on the porch again. Same coffee cup, same wooden steps. The house quiet, the air warm. I looked out at the fields and thought about how close I'd come to losing everything. Not because I broke a rule, but because someone decided I had. It made me wonder how many other people out there had stories like mine. How many homes had been taken under the banner of community standards. That thought lingered for a while. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Enjoy your victory. But this isn't over. I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. No name. No context. But I knew that tone. Nancy might have been locked up. But the HOA wasn't dead yet. I walked inside, locked the door, and turned off the lights. Then I whispered to myself. Round 2, huh? Because if they wanted a war, they picked the wrong rancher. That message. I stared at it for almost a full minute. No sound. No wind. Just the blue glow of my phone on the coffee table. Enjoy your victory. But this isn't over. No number. No name. Just those words. And somehow, it felt colder than the night outside. I'd seen what Nancy was capable of. But this was different. It didn't feel like a threat from someone behind bars. It felt like a warning from someone free. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, drinking cold coffee and scrolling through the local news on my laptop. Every headline said the same thing. HOA president arrested for fraud. Residents speak out against abuse of power. Justice finally comes to Fairway Meadows community. People were celebrating. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in years were throwing block parties. Kids were riding bikes again. Flags hung from porches like they finally belonged there. But under all that peace, I could feel something moving quietly, like a shadow under clear water. The HOA wasn't gone, just shaken. And people like Nancy, they always had friends in low places. The next morning, I got a knock on the door. A young man in a polo shirt and clipboard stood there with a bright fake smile. "Morning, sir," I'm from the interim HOA board. We're here to re-establish proper community management after recent events. I blinked. You're joking. He laughed nervously. Not at all, sir. We're just here to make sure everything runs smoothly again. We'll need access to verify property conditions and... I cut him off. You're not stepping on my property. His smile twitched. Well, sir, technically, under HOA covenant. Technically, I said, stepping closer, your covenant's under investigation. He swallowed hard. I'm just doing my job. Then quit it, I said, and shut the door in his face. I called Detective Cole immediately. Please tell me you didn't let them set up a new board already, I said. He sighed. Jack, it's complicated. The county froze the HOA's financial accounts, but legally, the homeowners can appoint a temporary board until new elections. The court allows it. So, they can just start over? After all this. Different names, same game, he said quietly. But listen, I've been digging deeper. We found records of other communities tied to the same management company. Multiple complaints, same patterns, forced foreclosures, fake fines, auction scams. I clenched my jaw. So this isn't just here. No, he said. It's a network. And someone's keeping it alive. For the next week, I watched strangers drive through the neighborhood. Clipboards, cameras, cheap smiles. They looked harmless. But I knew the type. The corporate cleanup crew. They were here to sweep up the ashes and pretend it never happened. I kept my head down. But I started keeping notes again, just like before. License plates. Company names. Who parked where, who talked to who. Because if Nancy taught me anything, it's that HOA power doesn't die, it just changes shape. One afternoon, I went to the post office. There was a small brown envelope waiting, no return address. Inside was a single photo. Showed me. Standing on my porch. Taken at night. A flashlight reflection caught in the window, like someone was watching from the dark. My stomach dropped. On the back of the photo, in thin handwriting. You should have sold when you had the chance. I gripped the photo so tight it bent. That was it. Enough was enough. I drove straight to the county courthouse. Filed a restraining order against Nancy and any associated HOA personnel. Then went straight to the sheriff's office with the photo. Cole wasn't there, but one of his deputies took the statement. He looked uneasy. Mr. Reynolds, whoever sent this knew exactly where to stand to stay out of your camera range. Yeah, I said. That's what worries me. That night, I installed new motion sensors, floodlights, and a camera system that could see a mosquito at 100 feet. But around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Motion detected in the backyard. I opened the live feed. Nothing. Just the wind moving the grass. Then, a flicker. A figure at the far edge of the field. Still, watching. I zoomed in. The screen pixelated, blurry. But even through the grain, I recognized the shape of that blonde hair. That posture. That calm, frozen stare. Nancy. I ran outside, heart pounding, shotgun in hand. By the time I reached the edge of the yard, nothing. Just silence. The only thing left was a tire track leading toward the dirt road. I knew she was out. I knew she'd come back. But how? She'd been arrested. I saw it. Next morning, I called Cole again. Jack, he said slowly, I was going to call you. She's out on bail. House arrest pending trial. My pulse hit my throat. She's not staying home, Cole. She was on my property last night. He cursed under his breath. I'll send someone by. Just stay calm, all right? Calm, right. By the next day, I had a plan. If she wanted to play games, fine, I'd play smarter. I spent the day printing out photos, timelines, maps, everything I'd gathered since day one. I pinned them across my wall like a detective board. Because now, it wasn't just about me. It was about every homeowner she'd conned, every family she'd bullied. This time, I wasn't waiting for the system to fix it. I was going to expose it myself. I reached out to a local journalist, a guy named Matt who'd covered small-town corruption before. He met me at a diner just outside the community. Flannel shirt, camera bag, curious eyes. So, he said between sips of coffee, you're telling me this one HOA isn't just corrupt, it's part of a statewide scam? Exactly, I said. And I've got proof. Emails, payment records, everything. He nodded slowly. All right, Jack. You've got my attention. Over the next week, we pieced it all together. Fake fines, property seizures, shell companies. Matt said it could blow up big, statewide coverage, maybe even federal investigation. But the night before the story was set to go live, he called me. "Jack, my editor killed it," he said quietly. "Said they got a legal notice from the management firm, defamation threat. They don't want to touch it." I felt my stomach sink. "They shut you down?" "Yeah," he said. "But listen. I sent your files to someone off the record. A contact at a major outlet. They might pick it up." That night, I sat outside again. The same porch. The same quiet street. Only now, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield waiting for the next shot. I thought about everything that happened. The lies. The arrests. The fear. And I realized, this wasn't about property. It was about control. The HOA wasn't designed to protect homes. It was designed to own people. And people like Nancy, they thrived on that. As I sat there, another text came through. No words this time. Just a photo. It was the same view from my porch. Taken from the shadows. Someone was there. Again. But below the image was a single word. Smile. I looked out into the dark. Didn't see anything. Didn't hear anything. But I smiled anyway. Because if they were still watching, that meant they were still scared. And that meant I was winning. The text said, smile. That one word sat on my phone screen like poison. No number. No name. Just that same eerie calm, like whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't smile that time. I just stared at the screen until it went black. By sunrise, my nerves were wrecked. I hadn't slept. Coffee didn't help anymore. It just made the paranoia buzz louder. I kept checking the cameras, the sensors, the yard. Nothing. Just empty space. Phil. I could feel eyes on me. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Matt, the journalist. He sounded out of breath. "Jack, good news. My contact at the National Ledger wants to run your story. They're verifying the documents now. If it checks out, it's going live tonight." I almost dropped the phone. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. They're calling it the HOA Empire. You might finally get the justice you've been waiting for." Justice. That word used to sound comforting. Now it just sounded expensive. Because every time I got close to it, someone paid to shut it down. That evening, I sat glued to the TV. Local news, nothing. Then regional. Then national. And there it was. Breaking tonight, HOA scandal uncovered, multiple neighborhoods linked to fraud ring. They showed photos, Nancy, the HOA office, even clips from my security footage. They blurred my face, but anyone in town could recognize me. They called me a whistleblower homeowner. It didn't feel heroic. It felt dangerous. Because people like Nancy, they didn't lose quietly. The next morning, my driveway was full of news vans. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in my face. "Jack, is it true you caught the HOA president on camera stealing documents? Did you really stop the auction of your own ranch? What's next for you after exposing this fraud?" I didn't answer. I just pushed past them, coffee mug in hand, same way I always did, pretending I still lived a normal life. But when the reporters left, the phone calls started. Unknown numbers. Blocked IDs. Messages that began friendly and ended ugly. One said, "You ruined good people's lives. Hope your property's insured." Another said, "Sleep tight, whistleblower." I stopped picking up after that. By the third day, the Ledger story had exploded. The FBI was investigating. The management company's offices were raided in 2 states. Nancy's bail was revoked. The board members were rearrested. It should have been the end. But it didn't feel like it. Because something weird started happening in the neighborhood. Trash piled up. Streetlights stopped working. Mail went missing. And every time I called the county, they said the same thing. "Those are HOA-maintained services. Contact your board." But there was no board. The HOA was legally frozen. It was like the whole neighborhood had gone feral overnight. No rules. No order. No one answering. It felt less like victory and more like abandonment. That Friday night, around 11 p.m., I heard tires crunching on gravel. Headlights swept across my living room. I looked outside, a black SUV parked near the barn. Not the sheriff's. Not the news. Unmarked. I grabbed my flashlight and went out. The air was still. The SUV engine running quietly. As I got closer, I saw the driver's side window roll down. It wasn't Nancy. It was a man, mid-40s, clean suit, expression calm but sharp. "You're Jack Reynolds," he said. "Who's asking?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who represents people who prefer peace over noise." I didn't reply. He continued, "You've made quite the mess. Big names. Big money. I'm here to offer you a way out." I laughed once. A way out of what? Telling the truth? He leaned on the steering wheel. "Out of trouble. Walk away. Stop feeding stories to the media. Delete your footage. You'll get a settlement. 6 figures. Tax-free." He said it like it was the weather. I stared at him. "And if I don't?" He smiled again, this time, colder. "Then you'll regret being the face of something this public." I took a step back and aimed the flashlight right at his face. "Get off my land." He sighed like a teacher disappointed in a student. Then he drove off, calm, slow, deliberate. I stood there until the taillights disappeared down the road. Next morning, I checked the cameras again. Every feed was black. I tried rebooting. Nothing. Every single wire had been cut cleanly at the junction box near the road. Professional work. That's when I knew. This wasn't just Nancy anymore. This was bigger. I packed a go-bag that night. Laptop. Documents. External hard drives. And a handgun I hadn't touched in years. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. As I loaded the truck, I saw something taped to the gate post. Another note. This one written in neat block letters. Printed, not handwritten. "You wanted exposure. Now everyone's watching." No signature. I looked up and saw a drone hovering above my driveway. It wasn't mine. I went back inside and shut every curtain. Sat on the couch. Tried to breathe. I thought about calling Cole again, but I already knew what he'd say. "Stay calm. Let us handle it." But no one was handling it. Because this wasn't a case anymore. It was a warning. I poured whiskey into my coffee mug and stared at the window. Every creak in the floorboards made my stomach twist. I thought about leaving. Selling the place. Starting over somewhere without HOAs, without neighbors, without noise. But then I remembered what Nancy said that day in the parking lot before she was arrested. "You can't beat the system, Jack. The system built you." She'd said it like prophecy. And maybe she was right. Because the truth was, even without her, the system still lived here. In the rules. The silence. The fear that people like me carried long after the gates closed. The next morning, I got one final text. It was from Matt. "Jack, they killed the national story. Corporate pulled it. I'm sorry. It's gone. Just like that. Everything erased." And I realized then. You can expose corruption. You can catch the villains. But you can't destroy the machine. Because the HOA wasn't about lawns or fences or dues. It was about control. And control doesn't die. It just waits. That night, I sat on my porch for what might have been the last time. Coffee steaming. Sky black. Air thick with that quiet suburban stillness I used to love. Somewhere in the distance, a drone buzzed again. I didn't flinch this time. I looked right at it, raised my cup, and whispered, "Smile." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared anymore, but because I was done being scared. You reach a point where fear becomes noise, constant, meaningless. That's where I was. The Nancy, the men in suits, the fake smiles, they'd taken everything but my peace. And now, even that was slipping. So I decided to take something back. The first thing I did was simple. I drove into town and bought a burner phone. No GPS, no name, cash only. Then I drove to a gas station 2 counties over and used their Wi-Fi to upload everything I had, all the documents, videos, notes, recordings, to 3 different encrypted drives. One went to a lawyer. One to a local activist group that specialized in HOA abuse cases. And the last one, I sent to myself, scheduled to email every major news outlet in America in 7 days, unless I canceled it manually. If they were going to watch me, they were going to watch me fight back. When I got home, the neighborhood looked emptier than usual. Lawns overgrown. Mailboxes stuffed. That perfect suburban image, gone. It was strange. Without the HOA breathing down everyone's necks, people stopped caring. The illusion of community had collapsed. Maybe that was the biggest truth of all. The HOA wasn't keeping things nice. It was keeping people obedient. That afternoon, I went for a drive around the community. Every house told a story. One still had an approved paint color notice taped to the window. Another had a half-built fence. The owner probably gave up after too many violation letters. And then there was Nancy's house. Still sitting there, perfect as ever. Lawn trimmed. Curtains drawn. Except, her car was gone. I parked across the street and watched for a few minutes. The place was too quiet. Not abandoned, just staged, like a dollhouse waiting for someone to open it. Something didn't sit right. I walked up to the porch. Knocked once. No answer. Then I saw it, a new security camera above the door. It wasn't there before. And a red light blinking in the corner of the window. I took a step back. That's when I noticed the reflection. My own truck, my own face, and behind me, a second car parked at the corner of the street. Someone watching. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Cole's office. He looked exhausted, bags under his eyes, tie loosened, paperwork stacked high. "Jack," he said, rubbing his temples, "what now?" "She's not done," I said. "Her car's gone. Her house is rigged with cameras. Someone's still monitoring me. You have to help me end this." He leaned back in his chair. "You don't understand, do you? She's not even under our jurisdiction anymore. Federal case now. I can't touch it." "Then who can?" I asked. He stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "No one who'll listen to you." I drove home angry. Angry at her. Angry at the system. Angry at myself for thinking justice was ever real. When I pulled into the driveway, the sun was setting, everything orange and gold. For a second, it almost looked peaceful again. Then I noticed something pinned to my front door. Another note. It read, "Tick-tock." Just those words. No threat, no signature, just a reminder. 7 days until my scheduled leak. And somehow, they already knew. That night, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark, watching the monitors, what was left of them. The cameras I'd replaced showed the road, the barn, the gate. And at 2:37 a.m., I saw movement. A car, no headlights, creeping down the road. It stopped near my gate. A figure stepped out. Tall, hooded, moving slow. Then, a flash. The gate camera went black. I grabbed my flashlight and went out, heart pounding but steady. The gravel crunched under my boots. The night air smelled like rain and metal. As I got closer to the gate, I saw what they'd left behind. A burned photo, the same one of me from before, but this time, they'd drawn a red X over my face. And next to it, scratched into the metal post, "You can't expose what we own." I went back inside, locked every door, and sat down at the kitchen table. I knew what that meant. They didn't just own the HOA. They owned the county, the news, maybe even the law. But there was one thing they didn't own, the truth. And I still had it. At dawn, I packed up again. This time, for good. Drove through the silent neighborhood one last time. The houses all looked the same. Perfect little prisons, built for people who thought freedom came with rules printed in fine print. As I hit the main road, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. A calm female voice. "Leaving so soon, Jack?" I didn't recognize it at first, but then I did. "Nancy." She laughed softly. "You think you won. You didn't. You just opened a door you can't close. What do you want?" I said. "I want you to remember something," she said. Her tone turned sharp. "You never owned that ranch. You just borrowed it from us." Click. Line dead. I drove until I hit the state line. Rented a small cabin near the woods. No neighbors. No mailboxes. No rules. And for the first time in months, I breathed easy. But peace never lasts long when you're part of their system. Because 2 days later, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "The Fairway Meadows HOA has been reactivated under new management. Property owners are required to comply within 30 days. Stamped at the bottom. Notice of dues, $1,240. They found me. I laughed. Loud. For the first time, genuinely laughed. Because that's when it hit me. You can't escape HOAs. You can't outrun control. It's not about neighborhoods or houses. It's about people who need to feel like gods in cul-de-sacs. People like Nancy. People who live for the sound of their own authority. And no matter how many you expose, there's always another one waiting with a clipboard and a smile. So I made one final decision. I opened my laptop, connected to satellite internet, and canceled the delay timer on my files. Every document, every photo, every video, every name, sent to every outlet, every platform, every person I could reach. No more hiding. No more deals. No more fear. If they wanted silence, they'd have to come and take it themselves. That night, I sat outside my cabin with my coffee mug. Same mug I had the day I got that first violation letter. The sky was clear. The wind still. The air heavy with the smell of pine and justice. I whispered, "Enjoy your control while it lasts." Then I hit send. And somewhere, miles away, a system built on fear began to burn.